Jeannette Flynn was born and raised in Northeast Ohio. She and husband Charles have 2 grown children and 4 grandchildren. She grew up in the Church of God in Ohio, attended Gulf Coast Bible College, now Mid-America Christian University, and the Anderson School of Theology. Jeannette has served in pastorates in the state of Washington, served the Church of God at the national offices in Anderson, Indiana, and currently is living in Orlando, Florida, serving on staff with Florida Church of God Ministries and Healthy Growing Churches.
Anybody can have conflict. Families, congregations, the places where we work. Conflict is actually a fact of life, and sometimes we're uncomfortable with that. In fact, as many times, we act as though conflict is always destructive, always negative. There are always disagreements, there's diversity, we have differences of understanding, differences of opinion. Conflict, if it's managed well, can actually become the fertile soil, the environment out of which good can come, out of which improvements and new ideas can come. In the book of Acts, there are a number of times that the early church had to confront conflict among them. And it was in those moments of handling that conflict that they found new ways in which they might be able to serve the body better, and it actually created a unity. However, poorly managed conflict, or if we choose to try to ignore it and hope that it will go away, it will ultimately undermine and destroy a congregation. And so it behooves us to pay attention to how to manage conflict well and what are those strategies that lend themselves to helping us benefit from conflict. I want to give you 3 elements today, 3 truths about managing conflict. First of all, wise leaders and thriving congregations manage polarities well. A polarity is when 2 truths stand almost in opposition, but it takes both of them to be the whole truth. A polarity is a kite that flies in the air but needs a string holding it to the earth. We develop in the church too many times the attitude that somebody has to be right and therefore somebody's wrong. Polarities help us to realize and recognize that when we manage conflict rightly, there doesn't have to be a right and a wrong, but it can be both sides of a truth that are handled well. And so in a congregation, there are important polarities that must be managed in order to strengthen a congregation. Let me just give you a couple. One is that of tradition versus innovation. We want to be people who honor our tradition, honor our heritage, who remember what our forefathers have given us and what those who have gone before us have done. But we also want to be people who are pressing forward, innovating into new areas, beginning to explore new ways that we can fulfill the Great Commission. A second polarity is that of managing strong visionary leadership and governed accountability. We want our leaders to capture the vision. We want them to be filled with the passion. And yet we must have leadership who is holding accountable and knowing how to help to guide and to support. Last, a loving and nurturing body must also be passionate about outreach and servanthood. It's true that we're the body of Christ. We are the family of God. We love one another. We love to be with each other. And yet the Great Commission calls us to be individuals who are reaching out to those whose names we don't even know yet. We must be intentional and passionate. Some of the things we feel comfortable and familiar with that we enjoy may need to change in order to respond to the passion of Jesus Christ for those who are lost. When we talk about managing conflict well, there is a second major area that I want to lift for you. There are actually 6 significant areas that a congregation must manage well. They often are the source out of which conflict arises. These 6 areas involve structure that both empowers leaders but recognizes accountability. In too many of our congregations, we have either ignored structure or we have allowed structure to be the catalyst that drives us. It cannot be either. It must be managed and managed well. Staff. When we have staff in a congregation, it reminds us that it is not the pastor's job alone to do all of ministry, but rather it is a pastor and the team. And that team may be paid, they may be unpaid, but we must address in the church that the job of ministry, the calling of ministry, the fulfillment of the mission is something that is assigned to all of us. Space is another area, the appropriate use of space, managing the space well. In congregations, it's amazing to me how many times we argue about who gets this room or who gets that room. We need to remember that managing space well, being thoughtful and proactive about how space is managed and how to plan for that space can actually reduce conflict and move us forward in the mission that is in front of us. Spiritual health is an area that must be addressed in order for a congregation to avoid destructive conflict. When we are spiritually healthy and spiritually growing, there are the resources that we have within us to know how to forgive or confront, to know how to talk with our brother. Spiritual health also means that we know how to stop gossip, how to cease from those activities and actions and attitudes that actually fester and hurt a congregation. Another area that we need to address is that of strategies. Many times a leader may have a vision or a congregation may even have a vision, but it fails to be fulfilled because we have not put effective strategies into place that can help us to fulfill that mission. And so congregations actually get to the place where they feel like one more time we're having a vision presented, one more good idea, one more program. It is imperative for us to learn how to build healthy strategies that is embraced by the congregation. And last but not least is that of systems. If each person in the congregation is aware of how things are brought, how things take place, how conversations can reach the ears of those that need to hear them. Systems in a congregation provide every person in that congregation with an avenue, a venue by which they can make their concerns known. Healthy congregations are unwavering about the values that guide and keep them, and their authentic response to the mission of Christ is the priority that drives them. Healthy congregations that know how to deal with conflict, manage conflict in ways that actually propel them forward, are able to address all of these areas. They don't avoid them, they don't ignore them, we don't hope that it goes away, but rather healthy and thriving congregations embrace the opportunity to have the conversations that are hard, to deal with the matters that make a difference, and continue to lift the goal of winning the loss and expanding the kingdom and keeping that as the priority. We can be major contributors to healthy growth by managing conflict well, or we can be major contributors to destruction by ignoring and avoiding conflict at all cost. I trust that in your home, in your congregation, you'll give attention to these major areas and find them to be empowering for you in the future.